Thank you for joining us today for Quest Forum Digital Event Innovation Week. You've joined us today for Automate and Simplify JDE task presented by Brian Rose, manager at Trillium. Before I turn it over to him, I want to let you guys know a couple of things. All phone lines are muted, but if you have questions, feel free to jump through the question module. We'll spend some time at the end answering any of those questions that have come through. We are also recording this session and we'll be posting it in the Quest content library following up on this and an email with how to access that information. Saw several other folks join, so I want to let everybody know phone lines are muted, but if you have questions, feel free to drop them through the question module and we'll spend some time at the end answering any of those questions that have come through. So at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Rose with Trillium for Automate and Simplify JDE tasks.
Great. Thank you, Christina. So like she said, the topic for today is to better automate and simplify some of your tasks within JDE. So quick agenda, we'll go through some introductions, let you know who I am, who Trillium is, and then we're going to get into the meat of this presentation. So a couple of use cases around how you can simplify and automate JDE tasks, and I've split them up between some transactional type functions, so a purchase order workbench, which allows you to do quick receipts, quick reversals, a work order workbench as well. This is more something that a shop floor end user could utilize to allow them to stay in one screen, but do a lot of functions inside of JD Edwards. And then the last one is going to be supplier creation or mass maintenance from a master data perspective, utilizing an Excel sheet and getting lots and lots of data or lots and lots of updates done in JD Edwards in a short period of time. Once we get through some of that, I'm going to jump into the actual Orchestrator Studio. So I currently am going to be showing you the latest and greatest. So 9.2.3.4 is the latest tools, Orchestrator Studio 8. There's a lot of awesome stuff that has been brought out, from the new user interface to the debugging tool. You can now hit business functions directly, which is applicable in different scenarios. So we're going to jump into that once we get a little bit further down the path, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So quick introduction, who am I? Brian Rose, I'm a solution architect, and I also oversee our manufacturing team at Trillium. I've been with Trillium for about 8 years now, and I've been very fortunate to work alongside a lot of big companies with their technology strategy. So how can they leverage things like mobility or Orchestrator or the new UX1 tools to better automate what they're looking to do, and make them a more efficient group to allow them to work on more value-added tasks in their organization. Not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I want you to know at least who Trillium is, who we are. We've been around a long time, about 25 years, and we are a JD Edwards shop at heart. It's what 95% of our resources do. We are 170-ish employees across the U.S. I'm a Kentucky-based resource just outside of Cincinnati, where we're based. We've been around we have an average of 16 years of experience across the board, and we're the global leader in JD upgrade. So we've helped 700 customers across the board from a JD Edwards perspective. And one of the biggest things and one of the most important things for us is our ability to gain references. So example, we don't gain projects unless we have happy customers, and happy customers help us to gain projects down the road. One of the kind of statistics to lead to that is we've had 100% managed services retention in 2019. So people keep coming back to us because we're doing the right thing and we're doing the right thing for our customers. So jumping into what we're going to be talking about today. So all of you obviously know JD Edwards. It is a unbelievably powerful tool. There's so many configurations across all the applications, your processing options, your order activity rules, everything. It is a tool that has so much power, but sometimes with that power becomes some limitations. So a lot of you or a lot of your resources that work within your organization may sometimes feel like this with JD Edwards. It may just not fit what they're trying to do, not because it doesn't give them the data that they need or it doesn't get them a very configurable product. It's because it's so hard at times to get through, and you have to go through multiple clicks or multiple screens or do things over and over and over again, right? And what Oracle and JDE Edwards has done is they have now introduced UX1, right? And this has been the buzzword for a couple of years now, but they've really invested extremely heavily in this space. And it really started with things like watch lists, page composers, Cafe One, and it's grown heavily into things like form personalization, form extensions, and then the biggest one, and what we're going to be talking about a lot today, is the Orchestrator. So Orchestrator has changed how people utilize JDE Edwards in so many ways today, from connecting to outside devices to automating processes inside of JDE Edwards, and it's low code, no code, right? So I personally have a functional background, not a technical developer or CNC or anything like that, and I can create orchestrations every day of the week. So it's a very low code, no code option that allows people to create solutions that help them to better automate what they're looking to do. This is just a quick little list. Orchestrator has been around for a couple of years now. Started all the way in Orchestrator Studio 1. I was fortunate I worked with a customer when it just came out. We were right on top of it to help build out some of their mobile strategy. And you can see across the board, it has really grown in technology and functionality as it's kind of progressed down all the different tools releases in Orchestrator Studios. The latest, like I said, is at 9.2.4.3. And that's the tools release I'm going to be working with today once we get into our actual demonstration. Okay, so use cases. Like I said, we're going to go through 3 specific use cases today around procurement, manufacturing, and master data maintenance, okay? Just to kind of give us some real life scenario, right? The procurement example is, end users have stacks of pallets waiting to be received because the process just takes too much time. They need a more efficient way to quickly manage purchase order receipts and also reversals inside of JDE. For manufacturing, it's going to be a shop floor user interface that has the ability to navigate multiple forms inside of one specific app. So they don't have to go to work order issues. They don't have to go to work order completions. There's a clock in, clock out functionality that we can now leverage that JDE Edwards obviously can't do out of the box. We'll talk through kind of how that works. And then the last one, like I said, master data maintenance. This is going to be uploading a mass supplier list, okay? This process for all of these is really applicable across the board, meaning I can create a procurement workbench, very similar to I can create a sales order workbench, just with different buttons and different orchestrations associated to it. The one thing, just for you guys to be aware of, the goal for today is to show you examples of how you can automate your processes. You're not going to come out of this presentation an Orchestrator expert, but it's to give you ideas of how you can streamline different things inside of the system. All right, so use case number 1, purchase order receipt reversal. This and the format is going to be very similar as we go throughout these for all the use cases. We're going to go through the old way, right? What you have to do today with no UX1. And then we're going to go through what it would look like by utilizing some UX1 tools like personal forms, form extensions, and then obviously the Orchestrator. So the old way inside of JDE, right? I want to be able to do receipts. I want to be able to do reversals. A lot of screens, the average, and this is right, up to interpretation based on how you have things configured and your processing options and order activity rules. So these kind of fluctuate from a numbers perspective, but usually it's, 1 to 3 minutes per receipt, or reversals actually probably take a little bit longer than a receipt. 6 to 10 forms based on configuration, 20 to 40 mouse clicks. So you're clicking a lot to get through, whether it's, finding your order, finding the line, putting in the quantity, blah, blah, blah. All of those add up. If you do enough receipts during the day, it's going to add up to a lot of time. So, where this kind of extrapolates to is 1 to 3 hours per, the baseline for all of these is going to be 50 transactions. Okay, so 1 to 3 hours per 50 receipts or reversals. That's a lot of time. The goal for an ERP system is to help you be more efficient, not to be less efficient, right? So we want our end users to be able to do transactions inside of JDE easily. So they have more time to go in, make sure all the labels on the pallets are correct, or bring all the material to the staging location. All of those value-added tasks, that's what we want everyone to be working on. We don't want them to be doing clerical work inside of JDE when we can make it a much more automated. Okay? So this is, like I said, the old way to go through and do these types of transactions. What does the new way look like, right? So what you'll see here, and we'll jump into a demonstration of all these as we kind of move forward, but what's the new way with Orchestrator and personal forms and form extensions? So on the bottom left here, you'll see I have one single screen, which shows all my open purchase orders, closed purchase orders, and we can, once again, depending on configuration, change how all this works. But I'm hooking up quick buttons on my page, right? So I have a quick receipt button. I have a quick reversal button. So I can pick any lines that I want in here, click quick receipt, click quick reversal, and it will kick off orchestrations based on what that specific function is, okay? So just think about right now, if I want to do a quick receipt across 3 different POs, right? I'd have to go to PO receipts, look up that PO, click into it, click on what lines I want to receive, click OK, click the print function, right? There's a lot of clicks. In here, I can click across 4 different POs in one screen and do a quick receipt and have it do all of that work for you in the background by kicking off these orchestrations. So when you go from a timing, or you think about this from a, how much am I gaining by going down this path? Just, you'll see 10 to 15 minutes of the building of these orchestrations is not the hard part. And that's something that I hope I can stress kind of across this whole presentation is creating orchestrations is very, very easy. What takes the time is defining what's the best way to utilize those orchestrations, right? So laying out a plan of, okay, I want to be able to do this, this, and this. Okay, these are the orchestrations I need. That's what takes the time. It's not building them. So 10 to 15 minutes to build the orchestration. You go down to 3 clicks, right? You click on the PO, click on the line, and the line, you go quick receipt or quick reversal. It's so simple. 1 to 5 seconds per receipt. So you go from 1 to 3 hours for 50 receipts to 5 minutes for 50 receipts. Right? That adds up over time. So like I said, you have, from an end user perspective, more time to go through and work on those value-added tasks. So I'm going to go ahead now and just jump into and show you a quick demo of what that looks like. All right, so we're going to go ahead and log in. So like I brought it before, latest and greatest, 9243. All of my apps for today are going to be up here in the favorites. So we're going to start with purchase orders. So if I pop in here, you're going to see it looks very similar to that screenshot. I have a list of POs that are open based on my queries. I have a quick receipt button, a quick reversal button, and I can come through and just say, all right, I got this one here on 7756. I've got this one here on 7758, right? Different PO, different part. And I've also got this. And I want to do a quick receipt on these to go through all of those steps that I talked about before and do that actual receipt. So I click quick receipt. I click find. Pretty incredible, right? So in that short period of time, it went through and did all my receipts and printed out my paperwork. So if I were to go up here and look at my job status, printed out my receivers for all of them, right? So all of those clicks that an end user had, they go away. And just to kind of give you too a nice visual, I can have a Cafe 1 in here. So if I click on this, it shows me that receipt that I just did, right? Just like you would if you were to go in and do that specific receipt inside of standard 4312. But all of it can be done very easily in here. Now, let's say I'm an end user. I went through, I picked my orders. and I accidentally clicked one. I didn't mean to receive it. What's that process look like for you today? I can imagine there's a lot of paperwork, right? You're sending something up maybe to someone in the office to do a reversal. There's a lot of time to do that, right? Maybe just based on a mistake. Well, I can just come in here based on this orchestration I have attached to this button and say, actually, I want to reverse this one. Quick reversal. And you'll see it opened up those two lines that I had selected, right? It reversed those receipts, opened up my lines to allow me to now go through and receive the ones that are correct. So let's think of if I had to do that reversal in standard JDE Edwards without the buttons, without this Cafe One and form personalization. So I'm going to use this 7759. So I'd have to say, all right, let me go. I got to go to my reversals app. I got to put in my PO number. I got to click find. I'm going to say, yep, I want to reverse this, reverse receipt. I'm going to confirm. I'm going to click OK, right? It's just, there's a lot of steps, and all of that can be done in the same exact transactions by one click, right? So it is a very powerful option to allow you to just reverse or to automate processes in JDE that at the end of the day is doing the exact same thing. It's just the mechanism that goes in and does it. If I click find, you'll see it obviously did that reverse just like it would have in the orchestration. Okay, so really powerful use case here. You can add as many buttons as you want too, right? So now I have quick receipt and quick reversal, but you could have print PO, you could have print labels, you could have move item from receipt routing from staging to stock. There's tons of different use cases just from a procurement perspective. Speed status updates, right? Remove items from holds, approve POs. It's the gambit you can really run with this. So that's our first use case. So now I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint and jump into our next one. So use case number 2 is going to be around the manufacturing shop floor space. So just to recap once again, we have shop floor users. They have to navigate multiple forms to complete their day-to-day. They want a single app where they can complete all their tasks in one screen, right? They don't have to go to completions specifically. They don't have to go to clock in, clock out. They don't have to go to issues. All of it can be done in a single screen. So when we talk about old way and new way, once again, 2 to 5 minutes per clock in, clock out, and completions. The one key thing I'll say too is JDE Edwards inherently doesn't have a clock in, clock out functionality. It's always been a big limitation that a lot of places we go have to utilize a third-party solution or put everything in Excel and manually put it in. You can now use the Orchestrator to do a clock in, clock out type functionality. And this doesn't have to be just for discrete work orders. This can be for machine downtime. If I want to be able to track how long a machine's down, I can have a button, click on it, puts the status at down, another button that puts it back up, so, or it could be for CAM work orders. You can go up all across different ways with this from a clock in, clock out perspective. 10 to 14 forms, again, based on configuration, 30 to 50 clicks. I mean, you're clicking all over the place to do this. When you talk about doing issues, doing hours, doing completions, there's a lot of things you have to do. You're at 2 to 5 hours per 50 completions or clock in, clock outs or whatever it is. A lot of time, and it's a lot of forms you can see down here. There's a lot of different things you have to get into. How do we make this easier? Once again, very similar to the layout of the procurement page, but this is work order based. So I have 3 different orchestrations that I'm utilizing. One is for a clock in, one's for a clock out, and one is for a work order completion. Now that work order completion also calls a backflush, so it's issuing all my material and it's doing all that work for me in the background. So new way, right? This one maybe a little bit longer to build because we have 3 orchestrations, so let's say 30 to 40 minutes. One click, right? You click clock in, you're in. There's no moving around the system. So 1 to 5 seconds, you're at 5 minutes for 50 completions. In all reality, it could be a lot more than that. So let's say end of every single day, I'm an end user. I do all my work throughout the day. I do 15 work orders. And my current process today is at the end of the day, I go in and do all my completions. That's just the strategy. I can just grab all 15 orders, click complete, and it'll do all completions at one time, right? It'll just click through that array to put that information, do those completions for you, right? So it doesn't have to be a single work order at a time. You can do multiple work orders at one time, which is unbelievably powerful. That's something that was just kind of introduced fairly recently to give you the ability to click multiple rows and have them all be processed by that actual orchestration. So once again, we'll jump in and do a quick demo on this. Back out of our POs. All right, so we're going to come in here to our work orders. And this is our work order screen. Now, the one thing being, once again, in the manufacturing space that is consistent across every single customer I've ever been at is the people on the shop floor want things to be simple. It's just, that's the way it always works because it makes them more efficient. Like I said earlier, it allows them to work on more value-added tasks versus them having to do a bunch of stuff systematically inside of JDE Edwards, okay? So this is taking your work order scheduling app and adding some buttons at the top, querying my data based on my start date. So you can see I have all my start dates and the sequence of orders that I have. On the right side, I have some different cafe ones. So one is a parts list. So I want to be able to see the parts list that I have for that specific work order, right? I can, instead of having to go up to a row exit, clicking parts list, taking a look, all right, let me go back. Oh, no, I need to look at it again, right, back and forth. You can have it just sitting on your screen and give you the ability to view that information in a very quick fashion. Other one, right, I have currently, this is any orders that I'm currently clocked into. Okay, so I can have a list here of an order that I'm clocked into, and it'll give me that view and visual of, right, when did I start it, and when do I need to complete it by, things like that, right? So up here in the clock in, clock out, one of the really cool things that you can do with the orchestrator is you can take, we'll call it system values, and use those as string values in an orchestration. So a great example of that is I'm currently logged in with my user ID. My user ID has an address book automatically associated to it. I don't have to add a value in here which says, what address book am I? It automatically knows I'm 6001. So when I click clock in, it clocks me in with that employee name, right? So we don't have to have the end user put in an employee number. We could just have them click clock in and it will put them in a job. So let's say I want to come in here and clock into a work order. I click this clock in button. And now I went from not clocked into anything, right, to having a begin date, status of P, which means processing, but no current end date associated to this job, right? So this here is giving me that timestamp that says, when did I start the work, my open end date, and then once I do a clock out, or if I were to transition to another job, it will automatically clock me out of that current job and clock me into the new one. So if I were to click on this one, click clock in, you'll see it automatically clocked me out of 496771 work order number and clocked me into 496798. All of that logic is built in the background from an orchestration perspective. So from an end user, they don't know any different from what their process is, right? They clock in when they start. If they go to a new job, they can clock out, or they can just clock in and it'll do the clock out for them. It's something that is super simple for them to do. And let's say I want to clock out of that job, right? I would just click clock out. Now it's clocked me out. I currently have no open work order entries in, and I know that I don't have myself on the clock right now. So just by these simple buttons inside of JDE, I can automate so many different processes. A completion is a great idea too. So if I want to come in and do a completion on this specific work order, I just click complete. And you'll see it dropped off my list because that job is now closed. The completion's done. It issued all my material. We can have it do all different types of things in one step, right? I could issue, we were at a customer and they needed to issue the material, do the completion, and then put a product on hold because it had to go through a 72-hour holding period before it was able to be sold from, off the shelves. So what we could do in this orchestration is do the completion, issue the material, put the item on hold, and then we could have a calculation to say every 72 hours, right, let's run these orchestrations and have them automatically come back off hold, just from a automation perspective. So it's really, really powerful stuff. To give you a relation of what this app looked like before all the personalizations and orchestrations, if I were to fast path to a different version, this looks a little bit more complex, right? I can see people maybe having some hesitation of using a screen like this because now I have to row exit or come over here. Oh, I'm out of real estate. I can really change an end user's experience with no code and just utilizing UX1 tools. So unbelievably powerful, and it'll give you and your end user just a more seamless and streamlined process inside of JDE. Okay, so other use cases for simplified forms. This is a very limited list, but once again, the goal for today is to spur ideas for you guys of other types of ways you can use a similar approach, right? So Sales Order Workbench. If I want to be able to do quick speed status updates or quick removal of order holds or printing required documentation, all that can be combined onto one screen. I can't tell you how many places we've gone who have built a huge custom power form for sales order entry. And the big reason is because they may move work order statuses, order activity rules, based on their different functions, right? So some places we go want them to be on hold until they're approved, and then they will move them to a different status when they're ready for production or when they have received or signed the quote. We can have buttons across the whole top of the board that flows through that process. So Sales Order Workbench is a great one. Planner Workbench, so allowing you to do your scheduling of machines, capacity planning, all that in one screen. Quality Workbench, you could do things like placing items on hold, completing quality testing. So if you have a pretty simplistic yes/no, maybe it's a final inspection test, we could very easily have a value you enter on that screen, and it'll pass into your quality test. Printing required documentation, and then a CAM workbench. CAM is actually a really good one for orchestrations and personal forms because that is a monster from a visual perspective. For anyone who utilizes CAM inside of JDE, there's just a lot of fields, right? You can scrunch all that into only what you need to see and make the end user experience much better. And then forecasting, so if you want to be able to easily recalculate your forecast, update supplier performance, all those can be put onto a specific page. All right, so we're going to get into our last use case. This one is going to be master data maintenance, okay? This, once again, can be used across the board. We'll talk about some other use cases or examples of how you can utilize this in a little bit. But the scenarios, the procurement team's currently behind because the workload it takes to create these suppliers in JDE. They haven't been able to put in POs because they're waiting to get all the information in. The team who creates them just needs a more streamlined approach, okay? So once again, old way, going through address book, adding your address book record, alpha name, their address, their net terms, all of those different pieces, right? Lots of clicks, lots of forms, 4-ish hours probably per 50 suppliers, a lot of time. New way, use Excel. You know, with the Orchestrator and Excel, you can create your own, I like to kind of position them as you can create your own Z tables, right? There's a lot of really nice Z tables that come with JDE Edwards, but not every single function has a Z table, right? And you can now utilize Excel to create your own Z tables, right? So building this one, very simple, 10 to 15 minutes. You really have no clicks from an end user because they drop an Excel sheet on an FTP and it's gone, right? The scheduler will pick it up. You can have the scheduler remove that Excel doc from the FTP once it's been run, so it doesn't obviously rerun over and over and over again. And it takes 30 seconds for you to add 50 suppliers. Okay, so I drop an Excel doc on an FTP, and I'll show you in a little bit. You run that orchestration, it takes 30 seconds to create 50 suppliers. So think of this across item master, suppliers, customers, bills of materials, routings, all those master data functions. You can now add, update, do a lot of different things in a very easy way in Excel. I mean, a lot of people are doing stuff in Excel anyways, so why not leverage the base table and data you're using and just facilitate that function a little bit easier in JDE. And then the last thing too, you can see with the Orchestrator, we can send out emails or notifications or things that tell happened, right? Some type of event happened, and we'll go through some of that. So once again, we're going to go through a demo here. Now, this demonstration is going to kind of lead us into the next part of this presentation, which is going to be the new tools within the Orchestrator. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the Orchestrator Workbench, show you kind of how that works and some of the really neat advancements that have been brought out fairly recently. Now, depending on what tools and Orchestrator client you're on, it may look unbelievably different or may just look a little bit different. So the features though, like the debugger and the design mode, we're going to get into our game changers in my opinion, especially for someone who builds these all the time. So we'll jump into that. All right. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close out of all my apps. And I'll leave this open because we'll be able to go and kind of show you an example of the Orchestrator actually running. So I'm going to log in here, Orchestrator Studio. And like I said, based on what tools you're on, this may look very, very different or may look not so different. But the visual view is really nice. It has everything kind of listed on their main page now, from your orchestrations to your notifications, all the components within it. So I always like to think of those as the furniture in the house, right? Your orchestration is the house and everything you put in it, all the kids' toys and everything, right, is those different components from an orchestration perspective. Down here on the bottom, same type of thing. These are what were in the tools previously. So when I say tools up here in the top, so getting to JDE Edwards, going to the monitor, the scheduler is obviously a lot different. That's a really good tool. We won't be getting into that much today, but I'm going to go ahead and jump in here to a orchestration. And I'm going to pull up the ones we are going to be talking about today. I'm just going to filter down by quest. All right, so in the orchestration here, there's a couple of quick things that I'm going to show you guys. So one, how this orchestration works, right? What the steps are, what you need to do to run it, what things like this guy right here means to you, right, from a broken mapping perspective, and then also what the Excel sheet looks like as well, okay? So an Excel sheet I have for this specific orchestration is something very simple, okay? We can have as many fields in here as we want, but I have alpha name, address, city, state, postal code, country, payment terms. You can have 50 different values in here. It's dependent on what you want. I have, once again, just a listing of 50 different records that I want to add. So this is going to be our basis for today's information. So this is a great little visual that we can have and look at. So when you get an orchestration, you want to make sure your mapping is correct. And the mapping is where do your inputs go from a notification perspective. So I can come in here and look at what am I missing? And you can see I forgot to add previously assigned number. Okay, so I now map that, click save. And my mapping is now corrected. So very visual, easy functions inside of the Orchestrator tool that says, is everything the way that it should be, right, ultimately. So the way that this orchestration works is whenever you do an XL upload, you have to have an FTP connector. One of the new updates that you'll see in this new tools release is the way you've had to do this in the past is you have to have first your FTP connector, and then you have to have your orchestration connector, right? So I have to have a connector which calls the orchestration. What you can do now is you can call orchestrations directly in an orchestration, which is really powerful. Same type of thing with notifications. How you had to do this in the past is you'd have to have a connector which calls this specific orchestration or this specific notification. Now I have it all built into one, and I don't have to create another component within that actual orchestration. So let's say I want to run this example. To do that, I click this start button and come up here and click run orchestration. And the first thing you're going to notice is Orchestrator Client now lives within the Orchestrator Studio. Okay, this is great. What you had to do in the past was they were kind of split in between two. Now they all live in one interface, which is really nice for people that are changing something, testing it, changing something, testing it. All of that is really powerful. So it lives, once again, inside of the studio. So I'm going to go ahead and click run, and I'm going to jump over here to my suppliers. And what you're going to see, you know, all the work you have when you're typing, you're doing all this. Well, look, it's doing it all for me. And you can see it's adding rows just like that. So think of all the things you do today, clicking the add button, inputting all the information, row exit to AR or AP or whatever it is. All that's happening in the background. And you can see it is listing out all of these records that I had in that Excel sheet. Think of how much time that'll save you from an end user perspective. Tons, unbelievable amounts of time. If I were to jump back to the Orchestrator Studio, you'll see it does give me an output of all the records that were created. Also, if I were to jump into my email, I have an email that it sent to me. It said, supplier records created on 4/24, so that's a string value you can pass. Take a look at what's been created. Now, I could pass in a huge list in here if I wanted, or I could just bring someone directly in with a hyperlink. But what this is giving you is the quick access to make sure that, right, I dropped an Excel sheet on the FTP. Did it actually create my suppliers? It'll give you a validation to say, yep, everything that you had in there is good. And if you had any errors, you could build in this specific email, 49 records completed successfully, 1 failed, and what the reasoning is. So a lot of power you can build into that specific steps. So that is the example of creation of suppliers through an FTP. And once again, this is really can be across the board from a maintenance perspective. You can maintain, update, create everything very, very easily inside of Excel and the Orchestrator. So now we're going to jump into some of the other new tools that you have inside of the Orchestrator Studio. So I'm going to jump back here, and I'm going to pick this. This is an example of the work order orchestration that we called in our example earlier on today, right? So I'm copying into a work order, And just to give you a quick little visual flow, the way that this works is I first grab the system time. I check, is there any open steps for that specific user? If there is, clock them out, run your labor update, and then clock them into the new job. Okay? If there isn't any open transactions, just go ahead and clock them in. All right? So you can select these rules and create those very easily. Now, one of the things that I talked about earlier is that ability to now call business functions directly in the Orchestrator. Okay? One use case that we had was system time is not something that you can grab easily inside of the Orchestrator. Example, there's a lot of outputs you get like user ID, address book record, date. Time isn't one of them. So what we've had to do in the past is we created like everyone would if they wanted to hit a business function directly with the Orchestrator, you create a front-end app, which is a simple 55, and it pulls the data back, right? And you can use that within the Orchestrator. Well, now there's business functions that allow you to just grab the time. So I can, instead of having to create that 55 application, I can just grab that data from a business function. And let's say I want to go ahead and manipulate this orchestration. You'll see down here, there's this button called Design Mode. If I click on it, which is really cool, right? I can add, move, delete orchestration components in this visual view, right? I don't have to go all over the place. I can add them wherever I want. So I have a custom current time business function. So you can see here, this is, and I'll jump into it in a second, a business function that I call directly that gives me the current time, right? So I don't have to use that 55 app anymore. I can just call the business function. So I can get rid of this, click save. And remember, we talked about the mapping earlier. Because I changed my component, I'm going to have to make sure that I remap my transformations. Oh, I clicked the wrong one. So if I come up here, I need to make sure that I pull in my time. And the same thing on this one. Okay. And when I talk about hitting the business functions directly, just to kind of show you, if I jump in here, I put in the business function name, the object name, the function name, and you can see this allows me to pull that data back directly from the business function. And the only thing I really care about in this scenario is time, but this also brings back all that information, user date, workstation ID, machine key, blah, 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 right? So you can hit these business functions, grab your data back, and allow you to use that information in a step further down the path. All right, so let's go ahead and run this orchestration. 496,780. Yep. So for everyone who has used the Orchestrator, when you see the red X, you're thinking, oh man, what did I do wrong? What click did I miss? What input didn't I put in? What's going on? And finding that needle in the haystack at times isn't all that easy. But with this new tool, if you see right here, this says Debug. This is a game changer in that scenario. So what I can do is debug where the failure actually happens. Okay, so if I click Debug, you'll see it pops up. All the steps of my orchestration. Okay, so I can move this orchestration through each of the steps and see where the failure occurs. This will be a great key to say, okay, this is where I go and investigate what's going on, right? And what's nice about this, so in this debugger, you can get the data for each step, the data from the last step, and the output. So as you move through this orchestration, it's giving you all that data inside of this debugger orchestration. So you can run it all the way through, I can step through. You can see here, I can stop this, means stop the whole orchestration. You can actually select checkpoints, meaning I could say run all the way to here and then stop. And this is obviously closing. So I'm just going to step through this orchestration and let's see what's going on. So I click forward. All right, good. And this is a great example, right? It's giving me the data that orchestration just ran. It pulled back user, date, time, which is what I care about. I go to the next step. This is saying right now, if I have any records open for that specific user, and you can see I have a count of 0. So to me, it should hit this rule and go directly to work order clock in. That should be the way that it takes. So let's go ahead and click the rule. And let's go to the next one. Oh, there's something wrong with my rule because it went the wrong direction. It should have gone all the way to clock in when instead it went to clock out. So I know immediately that's where my problem is. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. Let's see what's going on. I'm going to jump into my rule. That's the problem. I did equal to 0. I meant to do not equal to 0, right? So I click OK. I close out. Let's go ahead and run through it again. And I'll run through it in Debugger just so we can kind of see, put in the same, let me put in the 496.780. Let's debug it. Look at that. So now we're good. It went in, it ran the orchestration, it brought me directly to the clock in. And if I run this, now we're successful, right? So just that quick view in the debugger tool allowed me to very easily pinpoint what is the problem. All right, so let's say now I want to run this. I'm going to put in 496.6.7.8. You can see because it caught a count of 1, meaning I was clocked into an order, now it goes up this path. So I can see that transition because I used a different work order and I used the same user. It knows I'm already in a job. So clock me out, run the labor update, and then clock me into the new job. So this tool, I can't tell you how awesome it is, and especially for the people that build these on a day-to-day, it will change how you troubleshoot all the problems that you may have today. So really, really cool stuff. So I'm going to go ahead now and jump back to our PowerPoint. So these are some other use cases around Excel uploads. Like I said, the list is huge. Master data across customers, items, prices, costs, quality, PM schedule, bills, routes, everything. And then even transactional data. We're at some places that want to be able to load in 50 POs across 50 suppliers in one shot, put in an Excel doc. Same thing with work orders or ECOs, forecasting. You know, with forecast right now, you really have to do one item at a time. You can do a ton of items at one time and kind of run through. So there's a lot of power that you have by utilizing the Excel uploads. This is just a quick little recap of some of the features that we went through, from the new user interface to hitting business functions, the debugging tool, which, like I said, is awesome, how the client is embedded inside of the studio, and then the design mode, right? So being able to very easily manipulate and change orchestrations on the fly. One thing I'd like to just let everyone know, so like I said, today wasn't to make you Orchestrator pros, but we can help you with that, right? We can help for any of these different scenarios that we went through today. We've been doing tons and tons of these workshops at customers because it is something that is changing how people really utilize JD Edwards. So if you do want to get a workshop or have us come and help you out, please let us know. You can go to weknowjd@trillium.com, send us an email, or you can just reach out to me directly, and we can certainly work that out. This is the list of the Quest forum everything that's going on from Cloud Week to JD Edwards Week, the training and the workshops. I will be doing 2 sessions coming up. So the one on June 11th is going to be Manufacturing Analytics Made Simple. And then on June 12th, we're going to have a longer utilizing Orchestrator in specifically a manufacturing environment. So kind of what we talked about today was really across a couple different spaces inside of JDE. This is going to be more applicable on manufacturing, and we're going to build some orchestrations in here. We have, a 3-hour period, which will be great. So it's not just going to be going through use cases, but it's also going to be building out some specific examples inside of JD Edwards. So I think I'm pretty much at time. We got about 7 minutes left. This is my email, brose@trillium.com. If you have any questions specifically directly you'd want to ask me, please feel free to reach out, shoot me an email. Be more than willing to help. Christina, are there some questions maybe we should go through? We got, I'd say, about 5 minutes. Probably can't get through all. I don't know how many there are, but.
Yeah, I think that would be a true statement there. You're not going to probably get through all of these, but let me just start at the top
Okay.
and we'll go through some, and then I'll just send you guys the list of questions and we can follow up with the attendees.
Great. Yeah, that works.
So during your first demo, there was a question that came out just about where do you put in other data, and what if you're not receiving the full quantity?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So the use case for today was a quick receipt or a quick reversal. But what we can do with personal forms and form extension is we can add a lot of apps or tables have user-defined open fields, right? So what we do a lot of times is add those to the actual form, and that'll allow them to put in things like a packing slip number, right, is a great example of that, or a quantity. Some of the restrictions you'll run into that, though, right, is if you're selecting multiple lines at a time, that's when we would have to kind of work through what that looks like. But you can absolutely add in other entry fields in that grid, which would allow you to do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Let's see. How does the standard security work with the reversal process?
Yeah, so the great thing about the Orchestrator is the standard security you have inside of JD Edwards is what the Orchestrator has too. So it uses the same. If that user doesn't have the ability to reverse receipts, it'll pop up and say you don't have access to reverse receipts. That's, once again, one of the great things about utilizing the Orchestrator is it uses all that logic that you would if it was an end user doing it.
Great, thank you. Let's see. What version do you need to be on to be able to select multiple lines?
924, I think it's 9241. I know it's past 924. So I can get an exact tools. That's what I'm thinking it is off the top of my head, but I would need to look.
Perfect. We can definitely follow up with that attendee as well. Let's see. Let's do a couple more here. Could you tell us how you get the orchestration over the rows you have selected in the grid?
Yeah, so the way that works is you utilize the form extensions. So in form extensions, what you do, and it's similar to kind of how Cafe One works. You select what values from that row should be passed into the orchestration. So you associate the orchestration. That orchestration may have document number, may have line number, as let's say from a procurement perspective. You would, in the form extension, click on those two specific data points, and that's how it knows what records to pull in from that line. So that's what gives you the power to say, I can pick 5 lines or 50 lines, and it'll process all of them. And all it does is does the same thing over and over and over again for each of those lines. So example there, if I'm doing a PO receipt, it's going to receive in the first line, then go and do the same thing for the second line and the third line. So it runs through all those.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Let's do a couple more here. Let's see. Can you do a completion with serial numbers, and if so, do you just pass the serial number over?
Yeah, so yeah, the answer is yes. It's kind of similar to what we talked about earlier with the procurement. If you want to do a receipt with a quantity, we would add a user-defined field with a serial number in the grid, so they'd populate that in. or some organizations that we go to, they have the system populate the serial number. So example, in JDE Edwards, you can have it be work order number or sales order number or a date. The orchestrator can actually pass that serial number back too if you have the system generated. So I could have the work order be completed, have JDE Edwards give me a serial number, and on the screen, the end user that just did the completion would pop back and say, completed serial number, blah, 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 whatever it did. So you can either add a user-defined field at the top, or you can just have it create it itself and pass it back to you.
Great, thank you. Let's see, for work order completion, could it be set up to complete less than the full quantity? Oh, I guess you actually already answered this, but
yeah, and no, that's okay. It kind of goes down the same path. So if there's ever a scenario where you want to pass in a value like a quantity or a serial number, we would utilize those user-defined fields that are in your table to input those values in. It's actually very, very easy to do.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Can you explain more about the printing of required documentations?
Yeah, so when I say printing of required documentation, in Orchestrator, you can call UBEs. So all this documentation normally is a UBE, whether it's your COA or printing of a PIC or work orders or whatever it is. So inside of an orchestration, you can call multiple UBEs. A great example of that is in the work order P48013, there's no row exit to print a work order. The reasoning why that's never been added, I'm not sure, but you can add a button on your screen that says print work order, right? And I can select 5 rows and click print work order, and that will run the standard 31410 to attach your parts list and routing, print out your paperwork. So it just is that ability to call any UBE that you want inside of JDE Edwards.
Great, thank you. Let's see, are there any performance implications of running orchestrations?
Yeah, just like anything else, there certainly is. You want to make sure to kind of scale your architecture based on what you're trying to do with it. This is always something that gets brought up during our orchestration workshops and when we go out and kind of help people utilize your orchestrator. We haven't had a customer not use Orchestrator because of performance. I guess that's the best way to put it. You absolutely need to take it into consideration, but it isn't what stops you from doing it.
Great, thank you. Let's do one more question, and I think for all the other questions, I'll just follow it with you, Brian, if that's okay. There's still about 20 questions left, so
okay.
Let's see. Let's look at the last question of what was the object ID of the parts list that you mentioned?
The object, the app, that I think it was P3121. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
All right. Well, for the attendee, if you need more information, if you'll just send over a message, we can get it over to Brian and get some more information. Brian, before we sign off, any last minute tips, tricks, or anything you want to leave the audience?
No, I mean, I hope this was helpful. Like I said, the goal of this wasn't to make you guys experts, but to give you some use cases and some ideas of how much the orchestrator can change, and UX1, not just the orchestrator, can change how JDE Edwards works for you. And hopefully, guys, everyone's staying safe. I know it's crazy times these days, but appreciate your time today, and I will make sure to answer every one of those questions that Christina sends over to me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian and Trillium, for participating in the Quest Forum here with us. Great presentations, lots of good comments coming through for you. But for the attendees on the phone, I'll make sure that I'll connect with Brian and the Trillium team to get some answers back to you guys, as well as instructions to access this information in those demos itself. Again, Brian, thank you so much for participating with us, and we look forward to you joining us in the community weeks in a few weeks. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.